Mike Kay, Charlotte Observer, covers the Carolina Panthers, joining us on the Heister Automotive Group hotline. Mike, I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't feel like watching the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday. I kind of felt like it was gonna go like we've seen it all year. I think my hunch was correct, was it not?
Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. The Panthers find new ways to look inept. Yeah. I mean, that's basically the. That's more of the beast than the beauty of this whole situation. I don't know. There are 5 more of these guys, and I'm here with you. Like, that's really what it is. I think some were expecting this to be a Steve Wilkes-like, hey, they get a jolt. But remember, Steve Wilkes, when they went to L.A., it was kind of like this. It was a nasty game. There were some penalties. There was sloppiness. There was Robbie Anderson, then known as Robbie Anderson. It just was not a great look overall for them. And then they got on that run. I don't expect that to happen this year. I think this offense is what it is. And, Bryce Young right now it's a weird comic book trope, but like the superhero without his superpowers, he's learning to function without those superpowers. And either he can become wise off his adversity, or he can kind of falter and kind of fall into the
he's 11 out in California with no powers. Stranger Things.
No, it's funny. You say superhero trope. I think classic Nintendo video game. Every Nintendo video game, you start the game off with you play a Zelda game, you play Metroid, like you get all your stuff when you start the game. And then something happens where you get zapped and you lose all your stuff. And then you got to go back and rebuild it. And hopefully you've learned so you can take on the bad guy at the end. And that is, I agree with you. That is where Bryce Young seems to be right now. But he's not the one going out and getting the sword and the shield and the sack of bombs that you might need to progress in the game. That's ultimately on the team to do that. And it's fairly obvious. It doesn't matter who the coach is. They still don't have the talent, Mike. Mm-hmm. So the bigger picture question with the Panthers right now is, who will be tasked with doing this? We've moved on from Frank Reich. Is Scott Fitterer going to get another opportunity to start making some moves to try to get this team better, or are they going to wait till the offseason to truly clean the slate?
Well, my understanding is that they're going to kind of see how these last 5 games go. I do think Scott Fitterer and David Tepper have a very good relationship. I also think he's kind of been dealt a weird hand where he was inherited by a head coach and then hired a head coach, but that was based on a committee of leadership, and they worked in a collaborative process. Look, I'm not defending Scott. I think that he should not rest easy right now. This has been an abject disaster on all fronts. That said, GMs typically get 2 head coaches that they hire, and he's gotten like 1 sort of. And so I think, everybody wants Tepper to be more patient. Well, maybe this is the alleyway where he's being more patient. Now there is the sentiment of, he can be part of the interview process. And then if a head coach wants his own GM, boom, that's how it goes. That's kind of more of a soft send off. But I think there's a lot of things still up in the air from the front office perspective. Remember, when you trade up to the first overall pick, you believe in the leadership and personnel people that have guided you into doing that. And so as an owner, you're more likely to stick with the personnel leadership than the coaching leadership because there's less tangible evidence of why a failure might happen initially. And so I think maybe Tepper's taking his time. I mean, I don't know that I agree with it, but I think, there is this national perception that and local perception for that matter, that he is impatient. Well, he's being kind of patient with the GM where everybody wants him out. I will say this coaching staff had a lot of say in the personnel moves. I mean, particularly on offense. And I think, Tepper's aware of what Fitterer had a heavy hand in, and perhaps that plays into this.
One of those players that they drafted was Jonathan Mingo. I kind of like the scratch off idea to Mingo. He's been slow to come though, but we've seen him finally have a game where at least he made an impact on. What did you think of Mingo's performance against Tampa?
I thought he played well. I think they kind of made a choice to feature him in this offense in a way that he kind of hadn't been. If you remember at Ole Miss, he kind of was this Anquan Bolden, Jordan Matthews-esque big slot, and they've kind of been forced to use him as a Z receiver because A, they don't want him at X where he's going to face press. He's not as savvy. And they can't really put him in the slot because Adam Thielen is basically the only consistent weapon there, and that's where he really operates. So, but I thought he showed some development there. He still makes some head-scratching blunders. I think he really needs some refinement in the offseason. I've been kind of disappointed by the output of Sean Jefferson's group, especially because Sean's a very well-respected guy in league circles. I was kind of like, on that pick. I mean, I think part of the issue for this personnel group and this team is not understanding the value of the market. They had the 39th overall pick, which is essentially a late first round pick. They could have traded back, gotten a lot more draft ammo, and instead they had a 5-pick draft, and this draft class is just underwhelmed at every turn. I think Mingo will end up being a solid number 2 wide receiver. I don't think he's a number 1. I just don't think that's his skill set. But there's plenty of room to grow.
You mentioned Steve Wilkes. I imagine his eyes or ears or something was tingling and burning on Sunday when the interim coach of the Carolina Panthers decided, hey, do you know what would be a really good idea? Let's run the football 25 times with our feature back because, well, our crappy offensive line can only do one thing, and that's run block. Mm-hmm. Like, this shit ain't rocket science, Mike. Come on.
It's not. So here's what's funny to me is like I talk to a lot of people in the league about this because I'll say this straight up. You guys know this. I've been on the show before. In 12 years of covering the draft and other teams, I think Steve Wilkes might be one of the best leaders of men that I've ever covered. I don't know that he's the best coach that I've covered Doug Peterson. I've covered Nick Sirianni. I've covered guys that have been extremely successful. To me, Steve Wilkes' understanding of football at just like a baseline level and understanding how to motivate other people is wild. Are wild, I guess, those traits, because there's multiple ones. Sorry, I am a writer. I've been up all night with a sick baby. But anyway, my thing is I think Steve Wilkes got kind of a bad rap early on in San Francisco. But if you watched that game yesterday, which I got to in bits and pieces afterwards, he called a masterclass on defense. And I think he's a guy that, when you look back, got a longer run as an interim head coach than Frank Reich got as an actual head coach.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, he won 5 more games. It's interesting to me. I really, for David Tepper's sake, I hope there were not TVs in the press box playing during this game, because during the game, it was running like concurrently with the Eagles 49ers game where Christian McCaffrey was having a great game and Steve Wilkes was balling out. And I think they showed Sam Darnold smiling on the sideline. I'm sure they did. You know what I mean? So, look, I think there are people in the league that are like, you can't win a Super Bowl running that old school style offense. That I agree with. But I think it's a really good base to building a program. And that is kind of where I'm stuck here, because when you talk to some people in the league, especially people who have been around for a lot of years, they preach patience and program building. And I think, like, had Steve Wilkes gotten the job, they would have had a leg up because of the way they built the program kind of from an interim basis and moved on. David Tepper wants to win. I think they would have had a better shot of winning early on, especially with this roster.
Yeah.
With Steve Wilkes in place.
So here's the thing, though, about the patience, the impatience with David Tepper. When you look at him on individual basis, yeah, Ron Rivera had to go. It was time. His time with the Carolina Panthers was up. It was time to go in a new direction. And not just from a Ron Rivera perspective, but also some of the key players. It was sad to see it broken up, but it was time. And with the Matt Rule thing, I argued you should have fired him sooner, because we knew what the end was going to be with Matt Rule. So you don't fault him for moving on from Matt Rule, because we knew it was a mistake. And I'll give credit to David Tepper. If this is not the coach that you think is going to put your top draft pick in a position to win, well, then it's better to move on now rather than sinking his development. So totally agree with moving on from Frank Reich. But this gets to the other part of it. Man, you better get it right this time, because at that point, I think the die will be cast for the Carolina Panthers and as a franchise, as an organization. Because I know what the argument is. There's only 32 of these jobs. You're right. Somebody's going to take it. The biggest thing that's going against the Carolina Panthers this offseason with this coaching cycle is that there's going to be a lot of jobs available. And when you start to slot them, that's when it becomes problematic for the Carolina Panthers. So based on that setup, what is a realistic coaching candidate list for the Panthers right now?
Oh man. It's not long. To be honest with you. Like I did when Wright got fired, I put out 20 names. I've since gotten a lot of feedback from around the league. Look, they're going to go after Ben Johnson. I don't know if he's going to want this job. He's going to have a lot of options. A lot of people around the league, when you talk to them, they think that you need like a program builder, like a Belichick or a Harbaugh.
I would stay away from Belichick.
Absolutely. Well, I would too. I can't think of a bigger personality clash in the world than Tepper and Belichick. But here's the thing. I also think when you look at Belichick's draft history, they haven't signed a top three round draft pick to a second long-term contract since 2013. Like, even if you wanted to make him a front office guy, I just don't think it works. I think what's going to happen is, depending on what happens with Fitterer, I think if Fitterer stays, I think they could go after somebody who's a first-year guy. I think this is not the ideal place for a first-year head coach. Then again, it wasn't really a great fit for a retread either. I think what they need is a president of football operations, overseeing the GM. I think they need someone, a Thomas Dimitrov, a Dave Caldwell, who has been around the league. You know, you don't hear Dimitrov and Caldwell and say, hey, these guys have a long history of success. Well, I mean, they've been to championship playoff games. They've got a long history of scouting. They know what a bad team looks like. They know what a good team looks like. I think those are just two names. I'm not reporting anything, but those are the two names that make sense to me. I think they need somebody who has experience in that front office, can say no to Tepper. But I think the idea of getting a program builder just so that Dave can take some time off from football operations is a problematic thing as well. I think, they don't need a Harbaugh here, in my opinion. I don't know that sets them up for success. I think what they need is someone who can really build a program and relate to players. A guy that I've been hearing a lot about is Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator Frank Smith. He is not a play caller. His background's more tight end, offensive line, but he does so much behind the scenes for the Dolphins that he's got kind of that day-to-day overseeing sort of personality. I think that's interesting. I know there's this dynamic in the NFL that, you want to hire an offensive play caller because if you don't, the offensive play caller, if it works out, is going to go somewhere. They need 2 years of being able to just run a solid ship here, man. Like that's at the bare minimum. Right. I think Frank Smith's a guy that is appealing. Bobby Slowick with the Texans basically scripts plays that leaves a receiver 20 yards downfield open every single play. Like CJ Stroud has been very successful because he's extremely accurate, but also because he has guys 15 to 20 yards down the field breaking free. I think you need somebody who's inventive, but you also need somebody who can grow and is not stuck in their ways. And I think that screams first-time head coach. The problem is you need overarching leadership that can put in like a safe ecosystem for that guy to develop and know that he can
and let that guy be the meat
I'm
shield.
sorry?
And then let the Dimitrov type person meet shield with Tepper. Let him meet every week with him. Tepper doesn't need to meet with the play caller and the coach every week. He just doesn't need to do that stuff.
Yeah, look, that's not completely abnormal. Jeffrey Lurie had weekly meetings with Doug Peterson while I was there, Nick Sirianni. Like, it's not weird to do that. What is weird is like calling up Jonathan Mingo and being like, Steve Smith told me you were a good wide receiver, so we went with you. I mean, like stuff like that is kind of that's kind of wild to me. Or having Nicole Tepper pick up the phone for the trade up for DJ John, like stuff like that doesn't necessarily need to come from the owner. Like that Blueprint series to me did more harm than good from a PR perspective.
Yes, I know. I completely agree with you on that, because what it shows to me, and we'll close on this, what it shows to me is that David Tepper is extremely online. Just like that is a guy who probably looks at a tweet. I've joked about this before. He'll look at a tweet and I wouldn't be shocked if he's shown a tweet to the coaching staff at some point. Like, hey, such and such said this. What's going on here? Like to your point about Mingo, Steve Smith told me this. Let's get involved. I mean, they're not quite on Jimmy Haslam. A homeless guy told me to draft Johnny Manziel, but like that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from David Tepper right now. And you got to step away, man.
Yeah, I thought. I know he's catching a lot of heat for that press conference, and rightfully so.
Yeah, what was the point of the press conference, Mike?
Maybe he just wanted to see me. I don't know. Who knows?
You didn't want to see your colleague Scott Fowler. I know that.
Yeah, well, what I would say is, though, I thought the Bryce answer was actually somewhat transparent. Like, I don't want to kill people for being honest, even if they're too honest. But I thought something that was really telling is he said, I had the opportunity. I could have vetoed the Reich thing. I could have vetoed the Bryce thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it in a way where it was like, I'm trying to be supportive. That's the disconnect to me. I don't know that I want somebody who doesn't have a football background being able to veto the head coaching hire or the number 1 overall pick hire. Like, to me, that's bad process. Whenever you read anything that I write from a criticism standpoint, it's always about process. And to me, that entire draft felt like the process was off. And then when I saw the Blueprint series, I was like, I was right. Yeah. And so it's been interesting to watch this thing kind of roll downhill, because ultimately you have to trust the football people to do their jobs, right? We're hired to do specific jobs. You've got to do the job that you were hired to do. And I think that that's the disconnect here.
Mike Kay, Charlotte Observer, covers the Panthers. Appreciate it, man. As always, we'll talk to you later.